Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. This is Isaiah Diesel coming in solo tonight. Tonight it is Monday morning here in South Korea, but it should be Sunday back in America. But I did want to talk today a little bit about my experience with Israel and Palestine and give some of my thoughts on this unfortunate, tragic war that is escalating right now. And I do want to start off by saying a few things very, very clearly. My mom was a very strong supporter of Israel, and we got matching Star David tattoos. I'm not sure if you could see this right here on our chests. And my mom was buried with a Star David on her tombstone. And so some of this stuff may initially come off as maybe being a little bit anti-Semitic. But I want to be very clear that as far as this issue goes, I'm non-binary because people say that, what are you, pro-Palestine or are you pro-Israel? I'm pro both. Those aren't mutually contradictory. I'm pro-human and I'm pro human rights. So I do want to be very, very clear about that right from the start. But I do want to start with a little bit of a context, and this might seem a little bit unrelated, but I will relate it back to this major topic. But whenever I was in college, the Jewish government, the Israeli government was bulldozing settlements in Palestine, and I was really politically active, extremely, extremely left-wing at the time. And I decided to take an Israeli flag and cross it out and wear it to school around my neck. And if you guys are familiar with the Anti-Defamation League, they wind up contacting the school and basically demanding that I get kicked out of school. And long story short, a lot of good came out of this situation because we wound up having an anti-Semitic, he was like a former consulate guy or whatever, coming in and speaking at the college campus. And so it wound up going into the news and stuff. It turned into a really big scandal. And but I made it very well known that I was not in the slightest sense of the word anti-Semitic. I was making a political statement about the bulldozing of houses. And this is around the same time that Rachel Corrie got killed. And I do want to say this, that the Anti-Defamation League, they had their email account was like Israeli bulldozer. So that was something that, I found it very offensive. And also, a Nazi organization came out in support of me, and so did a lot of Muslims. And at school, they wanted me to autograph some newspapers and stuff for them that I was in. And I was like, you guys got the wrong person here, man. If you guys think I'm anti-Semitic, I was making a political statement against an action. But the reason why I'm mentioning this right off the top is because I think it's very, very dangerous whenever you start putting religious symbols on, flags and start intertwining anything with the government. And so just right there, that's already, you're asking for trouble right from the start. And also too, I am a Christian, but if we are being honest, I wasn't a Christian back then, by the way. I've only recently became a Christian in the last decade. But if we are being honest as Christians and the biblical narrative, there's some unjust stuff that happened in the Bible, even going from the just a standard literal reading of, the Old Testament. You see that land was taken from one people and given to another. And so these roots go back so many thousands of years ago. And even from the biblical, narrative, you have genocide being taken place against people who are living in a land. And some of this stuff is really hard to stomach as a Christian to read, because with issues like this or issues of slavery, I don't ever want to, I don't know how to say this, but I don't want to like give God a free pass. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but I don't want to try to like justify things that may or may not happen, especially when I don't know the full context of everything that might have taken place. So I just do want to say though, but just from very first glance, it seemed that these roots were sown by God, and it does seem that people have argued, well, these people were really immoral and doing bad stuff, in the land, which is why they got kicked out or genocided on. But I don't know, as a father, when you have a child, I carry this as a father, when you have a child who's off course, you want to help rehabilitate them and get them back on course. So I can never imagine wanting to kill my daughter or have someone else hurt her. It does seem that God has played favorites to one group of people, and I just do have to say that right from the top. But I also do want to say that I had a chance to go to Palestine in 2013. This is a crazy story. This is an amazing story, but it does have to do. This is related, so I do want to just talk about my general experience, because some of this is philosophical, but some of this, I will show you this right now. I am writing my third book right now, and a lot of these, Why Race Doesn't Matter, forward by Jeff Scoop, who was a former Nazi, deconverted from that. And this is me in Palestine, if you can believe it. I was really interested in Islam at the time. And I'm a member of a website called Couchsurfing, and this website allows people to travel all over the world and to stay with different people. And so I've got to host about 300 people all over the world. And I've had to have a lot of my beliefs and prejudices disabused by meeting people from all walks of life and hosting different religions and people with a variety of views. So I can say that that opened a door for me that I would have never have imagined happening, because when I went to stay with this guy, he didn't tell me that he was actually living on an Israeli settlement. And at nighttime, I arrived at night, and he took me out to like this cliff, and he's like, actually the cliff is like at sea level, because the Dead Sea is like the lowest point in the whole world. So it looks like you're up on a mountain, but you're just at sea level. And he said, look, like that's Palestine, that's Jordan right there. And I was totally shocked, because I had no idea that I was actually in Palestine at that moment. But in the morning, I walked down there, and these two Israeli guys came on a Jeep. And mind you, I had a big Osama bin Laden beard and a turban on at the time. And these guys straight up had handguns. Like, they didn't pull them on me, but they were like, they had them clearly showing, and they're like, who are you? And I was like, I'm just American, and I'm out traveling. And they wanted to talk to the guy who I was with, the guy who I was staying with. So we called him up, and he explained who I was. And I was like, wait, who are you guys? And they're like, oh yeah, we're police officers. And I'm like, let me see your badge, man, because you guys just detained me here. And they pulled out their ID, their wallet real quick, and flashed it to me. But these guys were just, they were settlers is what they were. But they flat out told this guy, they said, don't come this way on your way back, because we might shoot you. That's literally like the words that they told me. And I want to contrast this with how I was treated as soon as I went into Palestine, because as I walked down into Palestine, it started to rain, and there was like a tarp set up. And so I ran underneath this tarp, and then this guy, this Arab dude, he starts yelling at me. And I'm like, oh shit, this guy wants me to leave. I'm like, I'm going to go get rained on. But he yelled at me, and then he went over and he he like brought me some tea and stuff. He was like, basically saying like, hey, like, are you okay? And so I wound up spending the day like in Palestine, and it's actually Jericho, which is the historical backdrop of the Good Samaritan parable, where you have basically religious people, spiritual leaders who see somebody getting beaten and robbed, and they don't help them. And yet it's a person who comes along who's a non-believer, who might be something like a Muslim or Hindu or gay or trans person, someone you wouldn't expect who would help them, but he's the one who actually takes the time to help them. And that's just a side note that I've genuinely experienced things like that in my life, that many times it's believers not doing the right things, that I see lots of other people who aren't believers, at least in a traditional sense, who are willing to do the right thing. But that's neither here nor there. I do want to say, though, on my way, as I was leaving, these Muslims, basically, who looked like they were all from off the set of Aladdin, they asked me to go to a mosque with them and pray, and they taught me how to pray. And then they were having some kind of spiritual retreat there, and I went and stayed with them at a mosque for a week, and they taught me about Islam, how to pray, how to read, and all that stuff. And I got to say, they were like the nicest, most friendly people. I can say this as with a clear face as possible. Nicest, most genuinely friendly people I've ever met in my life. And I was treated like I was a sultan down there. It was quite amazing when I contrasted that experience with the Israeli guys. But I do want to say that while I was there, I did, the guy who I was staying with, another guy who I just want to say, I actually hosted him in Israel. And then later on, I hosted him in Korea, and then I stayed with him in Korea. I'm hosting him in Korea, and then I stayed with him in Israel. So I stayed with like 3 different guys who I hosted for a week. And he showed me this documentary. It's called 5 Broken Cameras. And if you could remember the images of those children throwing rocks at the tanks and stuff, that's basically, he was the one that was filming that. And this guy's an Israeli who showed me this, by the way, and he was pro-Palestine. I got to say that he was a Jew, but he is pro-Palestine, and he was working on like a project where like Jewish and Palestinian kids could play together, like online. And guy was a true credit to humanity. He has grandparents who were Holocaust survivors. And so like not everybody in Israel is like even pro-Israel, pro-government. Just in the same way as you see like a lot of people who are like Antifa, they're against the government. There are a lot of people there who don't agree with the things that their government does. Okay, so there's that. Another guy who I surfed with who did a lot of tattoos on me, I might say. We smoked a lot of weed and he did a lot of tattoos on me. But he told me he would go like on the weekends and spend time like in Palestine. And the guy was like a total hippie, had like this big bushy hair, like totally not what you would think of like a typical Jewish person. But he told me that he got caught a few times there, and they basically just brought him back and basically said don't come back again. But if you look at that documentary, you'll see that there's like the situation is very complicated. Okay, I do want to say that right off the top. People who think it's just you have good guys and you have bad guys there. There's a lot of gray areas in this issue. And I do want to plug a channel real quick, which is this one. It's called Real Life Lore. They make these videos where it probably takes hundreds of hours of research to do, but it shows why the borders in the Middle East virtually guarantee that there's going to be never-ending wars there in the Middle East. And it gets a lot into the history of how the modern-day states have arisen. And I wouldn't even pretend to think I know even a hundredth of what this guy knows, because this guy is a bona fide historian. But I definitely would like to say, if you are interested in learning more about this topic, it's a complicated one. There's literally thousands of moving parts in this topic. But a lot of these troubles go back to, it's not like they've arisen in the last decade, because you normally see these kind of conflicts going on like every decade, like something goes down, and then it kind of dies back down, and then there's peace, there's relative peace, quote unquote peace, for a little bit of time, and then something always happens again. But if you really get down into it, these roots go back for hundreds of years, back to the Ottoman Empire and the British and the French. And there's been a lot of abuse. There's been a lot of theft. There's been a lot of murder, genocide, a lot of injustice that's gone down. So just like an iceberg where you only see the top, there is a lot of stuff that is, they have a very dubious history. I would say that there's been a lot of abuse from a lot of different sides. And so that is something to think about. Like, both players are victims of circumstances that have gone down for, as I said, hundreds, if not thousands of years. So I do want to switch, talk about something a little bit different, because I think some of this comes down to, though, apart from the history, is that there's just a genuine hatred of a certain group of people. And I have seen that towards Jewish people that I've never seen towards any other group of people. Like, it's so illogical, it's so irrational. If you think of why Hitler would be so obsessed about trying to eliminate an entire group of people, to commit genocide like that. And then there you have other people around the world that they just cannot conceive of a world where there's Israeli people living in peace and having self-determination. Like, and I'm not saying that's the vast majority of them, or even a majority, but there's just a faction of people who just, it's an anathema to think that these people have a right to life. And I could tell you, just try to imagine if my daughter was born in those circumstances, in that place, and imagine that there were people who wanted to eliminate my daughter's life and wipe out her existence. I mean, this is just a reality of the situation, and it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And in the past, it could have been argued that a lot of this maybe came down to like resources. People needed resources, and so they had to fight. Germany used that as an excuse, as well did Japan, to invade South Korea. And there might be some truth to that, honestly. When your life is threatened, I mean, people will do some barbaric things. And when I was in Haiti, I learned this concept from one of the guys there. He said, because I couldn't believe that in times of like peril, people would riot or steal from people. And he told me, Isaiah, he says, the higher the necessity, the lower the civility. The higher the necessity, the more you need something, the lower the civility is. Just let that sit in for a second, because it made so much sense whenever he told me that. And but I do want to say, with AI resources that are coming out these days, I think we can solve a lot of our problems, but unless this underlying like hatred, we find a way to deal with this, or some of our primitive natures as humans. Like, I think it doesn't matter how many resources we develop. There's always going to be this tendency to want to take something that doesn't belong to us, or want to hurt people. And I think that's something that should give us pause on either side. I live in Asia, whether you live in America or in Africa or in the Middle East or in Palestine, like there's something inside of us. You call it sin nature. Maybe some of this seems like it's programmed, maybe from a God or AI or a program. Maybe we're all simulations out there somewhere, but it seems like there's something programmed inside of us that is prone to destruction. And I think that's something that's inside of us is humanity. So to try to blame another person or a group of people is just ridiculous. I mean, I've known people, unfortunately, people who I've related to who believe that, like, I swear it could like rain or the weather could be hot. They will find some way to blame Jewish people on it. Like every problem in the world, they find a way to incorporate Jewish people into it. And it's actually so embarrassing. I'm related to this person, but there's people who want a scapegoat. And so in thinking about this situation, we got to start with the underlying, stop with the scapegoating and start with understanding something about humanity. Because I do deal with a lot of this in the book about needing to confront ourselves on some of these topics. And as a species, as humanity. But that being said, in Saudi Arabia right now, they're building something called the Line, which is like this line in the desert that's going to be able to house a lot of people and take care of a lot of problems that happen inside of urban planning, and it has the potential to solve a lot of problems. And even in Busan here in South Korea, they have something called Ocean X, where they're building these. They're building like this basically city that can go out and float in the ocean. And of course, you have Elon Musk, who wants to get us to the stars or the other planets. But unless we can solve these problems, like we might destroy ourselves before we ever get a chance to explore some of the places, like either in the ocean or outer space. Like we genuinely might find ourselves on the chopping block of like the evolutionary, ladder chain, where we've just eliminated ourselves and we've had so much potential. Like we have so much opportunity right now. In doing the research for this book, I learned that less than 15% of the earth has been touched by humans, meaning roads, infrastructure, farming. So there's so much untapped resources and so much space to go. But unless we can deal with this problem of hatred and moving from the past, I think we're going to keep running to these problems. If it's not in Israel, it's going to be in another place. Well, we also have what's going on in Ukraine, where they're basically the same. They have the same history, same ethnic people, Slavs, and people always think about something being anti-Semitic. They always think about Jews, but actually Arabs are also Semitic people as well. So there's been a lot of open racism and prejudice towards Muslims as well that's been very well tolerated. And I do want to just break this up for a quick second, because after spending about a week there, I was leaving Palestine, and I swear this is a true story that's in the book. But as I'm getting ready to leave, these guys call me over, and we start smoking something that's, I guess it's hashish. I don't know what it was. It was stronger than a cigarette, but not quite as strong as weed. But we were eating bread and drinking tea and stuff. And from the corner of my eye, I see a guy pick up an axe and start walking behind me. And I thought, oh my dear mother of God, I'm about to be featured on Al Jazeera tonight. And like it went by in slow motion. And I just pray to God. I'm like, God, I know you're out there somewhere. I know I'm not living my life right. But I'm like, if I meet you right now, just know, I tried, man. I tried in this life. And he picked that thing up and just started chopping firewood behind me. And then he threw it into the fire pit. And I was like, oh, God, that was a close call. But yeah. And I do want to switch up to on one other thing, which is about putting things in context, because a lot of a lot of a lot of people look to Israel and they start talking about the human rights abuses there, and they do exist. I don't want to shy away from saying that they don't exist, because it's happened. Like to try to pretend this they didn't exist is to like try to pretend that the United States didn't overthrow a democratically elected president in Iran, which has been a source of some other problems, or that we didn't support Saddam Hussein while he was committing ethnic cleansing against the Kurdish people in the area. So there's a lot of messed up history that's happened. And so I think we need to take like a full account, of everything, and not try to whitewash history, pretend like, use whiteout when we're discussing history. Because if the people who tend to support Israel, they will overlook some of the stuff that they have done or what they're trying to do as far as their settlements or cutting off communities. Like, just to give you an example, I went on a tour of Palestine with this group called Combatants for Peace. And this group was literally like reformed terrorists who were working with the parents who have had children slain by terrorists, and the terrorists had changed their mind and their mentality. And I can't even believe that, like, I was in their house with parents and they were working together. It's called Combatants for Peace. It's one of the 5 organizations we support with the podcast. But anyway, they were, as we went on this tour of Palestine, they were basically shown how they had fenced off certain parts that were cutting people off from being able to get to work, and cutting people off to be able to access certain things for like their business. And like, I'll just give you one example of someone who I met in England. This guy is a Palestinian, and he was talking about how it took him something like an hour and a half and going through several checkpoint points to be able to do something that should have taken him like 10 minutes to do, 10, 15 minutes. So it was inconvenience people. And this guy was like trying to go to school and, just your average Abu, your average Ahmed down in Palestine has like no remote interest in terrorism or, some of these organizations that are there. In fact, this is just something funny you should know, but like, they have these like smuggling rings that are coming from Egypt, and the kind of stuff that they were wanting there, like in Egypt or in Palestine, like was like just stuff like hamburgers and Cinnabon and things like jeans, just ordinary average stuff. I mean, if you walked around there like I did, just walking around, you would be so shocked to see just how ordinary and normal these people are there. Because if you go by a lot of this stuff that's on TV, you just think that they're out, just beheading people on every corner. And it's nothing even remotely like that. People are going about their days. They're trying to feed their families. And whenever you put any people in any situation where they have to, if you start to threaten, especially their kids, like, I'm a nonviolent person, but I mean, if something comes down to saving my daughter, I mean, that's going to cause me to get violent, and I would never do that normally. And I'm not saying this is not picking sides here one way or the other, but when you start messing with people and people's livelihoods and people's ability to feed their families or house their family, like, you might have some situations go down that, that may not have happened otherwise. And I think there's plenty of blame on both sides here. So it's not nearly as black and white as one-sided as you might think. And there's a lot of different factors. There's a lot of different players that are, foreign influence that's going on. And but I do want to end off with something that, I do want to end off in this and saying that, well, two things, but it is important to consider context, because even though Israel gets some bad PR for when there is human rights abuses there, this same kind of thing going down in other parts of the Middle East, such as in Libya or in Iraq, people wouldn't blink an eye. When Iraq invaded Iran, you literally had hundreds of thousands of people dead. I mean, horrible war crimes, ridiculously amount of stuff, and people just some of it is just expected that, like, well, I guess these people are I don't think they're viewed as savages or they're viewed as less than, but there's not, if a certain shade of people is killed, it tends to leave a certain taste in people's mouths that if people of a darker skin are killed. And that's a horrible reality, because we're all human at the end of the day. We all bleed red. And so, but that being said, like, there are Palestinians who live inside of Israel, like inside of Israel proper, and they have rights. They have you can walk around and see them. They're going to, some of them are on the police force. Some of them I met at the border whenever I was coming back in from Egypt, and you see them. They're working and they have rights, and but what I'm getting at is that Israel is held to a different standard than a lot of other places in the Middle East. So if you want to just be extremely hard on them, it's not accurate. Like, have they done everything right? No. Do they abuse their power and do stuff that they shouldn't do? Absolutely, 100%. Because that's what I was that's what I was protesting whenever I was in college. But I think, like, if you just think of something for a quick second, I do want to draw an analogy between, like, Black people and Black people rights in America, because a lot of people will say, like, Blacks have no rights, or they're abused, or they don't have any opportunities. But the fact that Kanye West lost $1 billion, lost more money than 99.9% of people will ever even get relatively close to. There's a country in which there's multiple Black billionaires who have been made, and where they have rights, they have scholarships and opportunities, and whenever there is police brutality, you see it flashed around on the news. And I'm telling this because I've seen Blacks suffering in Haiti. I've been to Cité Soleil, which was the most dangerous place in the world, where you have kidnappings, rape, horrible treatment of human beings, and you don't hear anything about it. People there, like, I've seen people bathing in gutters and living in, I'm not exaggerating this, living in houses that were like halfway destroyed from the earthquake in 2010. So the Black people, when I hear people say that Black people don't have rights or opportunities, I'm like, I've seen places in Haiti where, like, the worst Black person in America has it so much better than the people that I've seen there. Or you think about Boko Haram, places, in Africa, or you have other places, um, such as Idi Amin or Rwanda, where you have much more dangerous. It's so much more dangerous in Africa if you're black than America. And so if you just put things in a proper context, again, I know there's lots of bad stuff. I'm not making excuses for America or for Israel, because ultimately, whenever we're abusing anybody's rights get abused, or whenever anybody's othered, when we're othering other people or hating, uh, there's just bound to have some problems. So I'm not saying that it's a totally one side or the other, but you really got to look at a bigger context of things that are going on, um, because it's really easy to focus in onto one group and say we're going to hold this group to a standard that we wouldn't hold anybody else to. And I think that's just the one thing I'd like you to take away from that, from this talk. And just last thing, I promise. I wanted to be about 40 minutes. But I told you about this guy who was working on this project to get Palestinian kids and Israeli kids to compete and to work on like this game online together. And something similar happened to that this last, in the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics in South Korea, that North Korea and South Korea, who are still technically at war, I might add, they got to compete together in the Olympics, and I think it was ice hockey. And although they got their asses handed to them, like unequivocally, they got demolished. The fact is that it was historic because it was like the first time something like that had happened. And so whether it be through music or movies or culture or just, food, any kind of exchange that can happen, where you're getting to experience people from the other side, I think that is so much. It's so much better than trying to demonize or trying to think that this other side is completely good or bad, because the reality is that we are all various shades of gray. Like there's no human who's perfectly good. There's no human who's perfectly bad. Everybody has good qualities. Everybody has bad qualities. Not everybody lives consistently with what they say that they do. Even people in your religion, people in your political ideology or lack thereof, gets so easy to start making excuses for people and to justify behavior if they happen to have the same D or R next to their name. I mean, recently I saw this case with this Lori Boebert, the congresswoman, and I'm not picking on her, but I'm just saying, I just could not believe how many people were like, they'll jump on one side if they see them doing something, but then they'll turn around and make just the most outlandish excuses for them. So I think we got to be willing to confront people inside of our own circles, and ourselves, because I really believe that this extreme binary way of thinking it's contributing to this problem. It's not the only problem. There's a lot of stuff that needs to change, because, as I've said, the United States has to own up for some of the stuff we've done in the Middle East. So does Britain. I mean, Britain has screwed that place over. They virtually guaranteed that Saddam Hussein was going to invade Kuwait by the way that they carved out the borders there. And France as well. France has done so much damage in this area and in Africa. And so, there has to be an owning up of this. And I was just in France in December. If you see Paris, it is the most unbelievable place I've ever seen in my life. But you can go around there and you can just see all the stuff that they've stolen from other countries. I mean, it is disgusting. Honestly, it is absolutely disgusting. Art, history, and a lot of this stuff is still, remaining behind stuff that they've taken from Africa, from the Middle East. It remains behind, in museums and art galleries. It's just, it really is repulsive. Like we need to do better as a society, as humanity, and holding everyone to the same level standard is, I guess, what I'm going at in all this. So I really do want to thank you for your time, and I definitely want to get I do want to give a special shout out to Scott. Thank you for joining me today, and Mage too. But special shout out to Scott for well, you know what you've done. Yeah, but thank you, and I'm going to leave you with an outro. You can look forward to this book right here that really got to finish. But the whole idea is mixing it up, mixing up black and white. And I think that's the best way we could do it, is mixing up culture, mixing up food, listening to each other's music, each other's movies, and try to humanize each other as much as possible. And if you pray, please pray for what's going on there. If you are an atheist, send your thoughts, send your vibes, your vibrations will be much appreciated. This is a sad thing that's going on right now, and just we can only hope to end as soon as possible. That's all I got to say. That's all I got to say on that. I do want to say one side note that I was as horrible as everything was, I was pretty cool. Those little things that those Palestinians, I don't know what they were like helicoptering in. That's got to be the only bright point in any of this, seeing them come in on their hovercraft, whatever it is. Those are pretty cool. I'd love to try that out sometime, but pretty much 99.9% of everything else is bad. So thank you again. Check us out at our website or Facebook, Twitter, and I'll leave you with this outro.